So I don't really know exactly, you know, exactly why. One of the things is that I know up until a point, probably even into my 50s, I was still trying to impress or get approval of my father. And so I would go to, you know, great lengths to do that. The other thing that just literally popped into my head is that I didn't think that I was intelligent. I thought that I just worked hard. And so the Protestant ethic, which was alive and well in our family since we were Protestants, uh, or that was the you know, that was what we were supposed to be. Um, I just thought that I worked hard, and it wasn't until probably my 40s that it even dawned on me that I was intelligent. It sounds so absurd, but you know, I thought, you know, everybody who worked hard went to Berkeley or went to, you know, Stanford, or you know, was the youngest chief operating officer in, you know, the large health plan that I was employed by. And so it's interesting. And a friend of mine yesterday, this is yesterday, says to me, like, for 10 minutes, she went on and on. She said, you know, you really, really don't get who you are. And it's actually, I can feel the emotion, you know, now even. I was like, oh my God, and then she went on and on, which was lovely, you know, about, you know, how wise and brilliant and intuitive and caring and compassionate and all these adjectives that she used, you know, and it's so fascinating. There's a part of me that gets it, and there's still a small part of me that doesn't get it.
Well, it's hard to get, right? Like if you look at the word get, like where it's like receive, it's hard to receive all that you are because you're putting it out there, right? So there's like this, like, what is it, like one-way flow, right? We don't
Okay.
do to others. We don't like I don't think I'm funny, but like, oh my God, when my daughter and I were walking Walmart and she was doing some of my jokes, or she's adapted like the way I process and the joke, like the kind of jokes I do, where I'll do like that's like I'll combine two different things or whatever and be like, that's like a whatever. There's not a good example of this, but she does my jokes, okay? And
Yeah.
I'm like, and I turn around, I'm like, Ellie, I'm like, you know, I never felt funny until I heard you talk. And that might sound like I'm taking control of her brilliance. I'm not. She is brilliant. Like, people stop in the streets to look at her. But what I'm getting is that, like, I don't think I'm funny. And maybe people watching this right now are like, no, that's about right. You're not, you know. But when I'm in front of an audience doing jokes and telling stories or whatever, they laugh. And so it's like, but I could never receive that the same way that they receive it, right? Because I'm the one standing there putting it out there. So your intelligence is probably a synthesis of you, like, Deborah, from what I know of you, like your ability to like analyze the situation, analyze data, analyze human behavior, analyze where someone is. You're incredibly empathetic, you know, the downloads you're constantly getting. That the synthesis of all those pieces, like, and then we, the receiver, receive it from you. Like, what do you get from being that awesome?
Oh my goodness.
That's a question.
I know it's a question. So here's gonna what comes to mind, and I have no idea whether I'm answering your question, and if I'm not, come at me again. But when I was in the chaos that I was in when I was a kid, where literally almost, a good portion of the time it felt like life or death for not only me, but my mother, my sisters. Like I had to see the big picture. And I got great training. And I was problem solving. Like I remember actively problem solving on what to do with this when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And so I saw the big picture, I saw all the details, I was on high alert, and then I would just get into action to stop something bad from happening. And that when I describe it now, it feels pretty brilliant, but at the time it was just a survival mechanism.
Well, and that brings up like something I'm so curious about when I speak to people like you. Like, my hair is trying to survive right now. It's like, so my sister became, we had the same parents, obviously the same backgrounds, and my parents did their best. Like I don't mean to, criticize them or whatever too much, but my sister became an eye doctor. Very successful, had her own successful practice. People love her. She's amazing. And her challenges were a lot more emotional, self-worth things, but she was able to power through, and she created some health issues for herself because she was able to take the same void that I had, the same lack of self-worth and the same lack of foundation, nurture, grounding, and just fucking pound herself to the ground to get the grades. Pound herself to the ground to get the successful business. Her first job was at a very prestigious optometric practice. Like she was able to put herself through the glass door to get opportunities, and then she'd collapse, and then she'd get back up and keep going. Whereas a lot of time, for much of my 20s, I couldn't work full time because I was so anxious and had such little self-worth that I would just crumble. If I was in a job and I fight with someone, like a manager, and I disagree with them or something, I would just freak out and just quit. I was just quitting all the time. I couldn't get past because I had so much conflict and so much tension. So it's always amazing to me when I learn from people like you, how you were able to, again, with zero nurture, zero help, and then the same token being in that survival mode constantly, how you were able to create incredible, I want to say bullet points, but incredible pillars in your life, incredible achievements, right? At every step of the way. And that's what you help people do now, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, I do. And, most of us did grow up in a not ideal childhood. Because I've been coaching women for the last 35 years, literally, I have seen it over and over and over again that mostly, in fact, I can't think of one person who's landed on my coaching door that has had a perfect or even relatively happy childhood. So maybe it's just self-selection out, because I can help those who have had less than ideal childhoods. But yes, that's exactly what I do now. I empower women to be fully self-expressed and to go for whatever it is they want to go for in life. And it's, of course, as you know, different for every single person.
But it makes perfect sense. Again, with you having that ability, you were able to fundamentally create a reality that is full of achievements, right? And that's what I'm saying, is like I think for a lot of people, right, like again, I see it with like me and my sister and I, like, whereas it took me until literally, I just turned 40 this year, and it took me about until 37, 38 to really make the foundational shifts, because I had the aptitude to fall apart, right? Whereas you seem to innately, intuitively, implicitly be able to build and build and build, even while you were hurting, and even, you know, while we had this idea that you weren't deserving, you weren't smart, right? But it didn't, like, you, okay, so you were a hard worker, so you that phrasing made sense to you, and that drove your motivation and your, like, right? Whereas I had the belief system, I'm a piece of shit, like, or I'm a loser, I'm lazy. That was, I'm lazy. You were a hard worker, I'm lazy. So it's like, do you have people in your purview, like, do you have people that you work with that come to you with that mindset of like, I'm less than, I'm not a hard worker, even like they don't have the skills to get out of bad situations?
Well, that's interesting. This is who presents. It's and it seems to be, speaking of a pandemic. So the women that I see are high achieving entrepreneurs and executives, and yet, so they look fabulous from the outside, and then what they're suffering with on the inside is doubts and fears that they're a fraud. And so, you know, it's been labeled the imposter syndrome. But it's you know, absolutely prevalent. And what happens, just like you were describing your sister, is that they just, no matter what's going on, are still driven, until they sometimes collapse or get a you know, a really bad health diagnosis. And you know, and part of my story is, I was in the corporate world, as you know, and was very successful at a, you know, very young age. You know, I was in my, and I was second in charge of a hospital and a clinic, and had, so I was essentially the chief operating officer, and for my very first facility that I was with a boss who was the CEO. But anyway, so my career was successful, and then one day I was not one day, there was a kind of a long period where I wasn't feeling so well, and I had you know, whatever you would want to call the person, but somebody who could read energy, so an energy healer. And what she told me was that if I kept going and driving towards what, you know, and keeping up the pace I was keeping, that I was going to get cancer, and that she could see it. And I'm like, hell no, like, hell no, I no. And I literally, because I was a consultant, I was a healthcare consultant and coach at the time, and I quit the project. I was complete with the project. I completed the project, which was within a few weeks of finding out this information. And I just said, I am not going back to the corporate world. This is not, you know, this is not worth it to me. So, you know, I relate to your sister, and, you know, if I had gone at the pace I was going, and at the time, just to say, the job that I was doing, I was working for, and this story you don't know, I was working for a large um, preferred provider organization, a large health plan, and they had a hospital network, but they didn't have a physician network. So they created a new division, which was my division, and I was to recruit physicians for a nationwide network. And so in a year and 9 months, I negotiated 33,000 contracts, signed all of them, negotiated all of them. And again, it's, I don't think it's ever been done before, what I was doing. And I just, I was given a mission, and I went for it. And I did have, I had a staff, but I was the, they called me the big kahuna, because I would go in and would close the difficult deals, which most of them were difficult, with, physicians or physician groups. So it was at the end of that, when I was in the air 3 times a week, going to 3 different cities, that this energy healer told me that news. So anyway, I haven't told that story in a very, very long time, and maybe never the way I just did. But
well, that's incredible. And again, how many women are in that same boat, right? Where they're like, how do you quit that? I mean, I know how, but like they're in that boat, they're in that like momentum of like, they're closing these big deals, they're achieving things that they never imagined possible in the corporate arena, and it's killing them slowly, day by day. They're not spending quality time with their family. It's like, what is there, like a secret sauce? Like, how do you get them away from that? Like, how do you heal them? How do you get them back into, or not back, but anew into a life that is much more fulfilling and much more worthwhile and much more healthy? Healthy. Pardon my French.
Well, easier said than done. And I have got to say that not everyone is open to hearing that message and shifting gears. So I just want to be realistic about it. So I would say that I'm probably able to empower these women to have a more balanced life, probably 75% of the time, and then the other 25% just are, it's there's too many. I love what you were saying. There's too many rewards. There's too many kudos. There's too many outward acknowledgments to get, for them to give up. So I'm talking about the 25% that decide not to, listen to and practice, the guidance that I'm giving. Yeah.
And I want to be respectful. Like, I hope to that 25%, like, I don't mean to say that one thing is better or right than the other, but it's an individual thing, right? But like, for the 75,
yeah, I was going to say, yes, it is. But what I know is that I have seen, some of the 25% that I keep, that I'm still privy to what they're doing. A good portion of the 25% then do get into usually health trouble. So yes, we all have free will, and we all will do what we're going to do, no matter who's telling us, or what guidance we're getting. But I just wanted to, say that sometimes it's not a happy ending.
Well, then again, with respect to those people, like, counter to that, what are some of the amazing transformations that you've seen from the 75% that you've worked with? Like, what were some of the life-changing experiences they've had? Like, what were they able to do with their family? with their health, with their lives, creatively?
Oh my goodness. Well, what comes to mind is a number of executive women like myself have decided that it's nearly, if not impossible, to have that balanced life in the corporate world. And so they go off to create their own successful business. And so, I have a number, actually a lot of long-term clients. So I've seen, I can see the longevity of this going from, being highly successful in corporate, making, big bucks, which is another thing that is hard to let go of in this balance issue. And then go to create their own successful business. And it's interesting to me, it's a misconception that if you have your own business, you're working harder than if you worked for someone else. And that in my view, that's not that doesn't have to be true. And in fact, if you're committed to having a balanced life, you can definitely do that.
It's so funny you say that. Like, I don't know if I've talked about this on the show before, but like my daughter, a few weeks ago, said something about like, do you have to work or something? And I was like, what? Like, work? I work? Oh, I know what you're talking about. Like when I creatively play with clients and we tell stories and we unearth all these things, right? Like I was like, oh, other dads have to go to work. I forgot. That's what you're saying. You know what I mean? Whereas like it's a very different kind of work, I think, when you're an entrepreneur, when you have your own business, and it's a very different process. Did you ever watch Martin Short used to have a character that he did called Jiminy Glick, and he was an interviewer?
Oh, vaguely. I love Martin Short. He's hilarious. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely, he is.
So he would do this interviewer character, and it was so offensive and it was so bad. And he'd be like, "Let me ask you something," and then he'd ask like the most like overt, like rude question or obvious question. And so like right now, I'm gonna ask you the most like simple, basic question ever, because you said something that really resonated with me, or that I was curious about too. Is it's like, women in corporate, can they have it all? Like, is that? Because it sounds like we're saying no, right? But isn't that the age-old question? Like, as a woman who you are tasked, and like I'm a feminist. I work with women all day, but like I gotta tell you, my co-parent, my former wife, like she really does, by the nature of her relationship with our daughter and my relationship with our daughter. In COVID, she does still, and I feel so guilty about it, but she still does carry a lot of the weight of homeschooling and all that stuff, right? And I try to do my best, but so it's like women in corporate, I can't even imagine how. Carrie works from home, so it's fine, but like women in corporate, I can't imagine they have to do everything, right? Like, and feed the husband and the kids and do all the housework. I mean, like all that stuff. Like, is it possible to do that with the crazy restraints of corporate?
Well, this is kind of my view of the world here. So, most of the corporate women that I work with are not married and have no children, and that, I mean, it's not all, but that a lot of times happens, and it certainly was true for me. And so I have no children. I have had 2 marriages, and during the 2 marriages, I was, especially the early one, well, for both, I was working my tushy off, and with my first husband, I was still in corporate. I had not left corporate. And that's actually true for part of my marriage with my second husband. But the bottom line is that, you ask, can you have it? Can you have it all? It is extremely challenging, is what I would say. And and it depends on what level you're at too. So what I'm talking about is the senior leadership, and that's my clientele, is senior leadership or entrepreneurs. And as a senior leader, the amount that's expected of you is really off the charts. And I also might add that it's now I'm going to bring in the male female thing, but my experience is that women work harder than men. For a couple of reasons. Is they, quote, have to prove themselves, and the other is the inner dialogue that says I'm a fraud, so I really, really do have to work hard. So, with all that going on, there's not what I call enough. There's no leftover attention particles for, balance, and it is getting somewhat better, because there's the whole personal development world is saying that you should, self-care and all of that. So I do see a little bit of shift, but not, in my opinion, not a big enough shift.
Well, then this is great. And this is almost like my last question, is like, from your empowered perspective, and again, from the work that you do as a coach with women and at these levels, what are things that they can start implementing today to start shifting the paradigm?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. One is to not buy into the old adage that self-care is selfish. What I'm a strong believer in is that you need to fill up your own cup before you can serve, your company, your business, your family, your anything. So self-care is not selfish. That would be the first thing. The second would be, and it goes back to earlier when you said, so how come you're different in terms of being able to succeed, and even as a little girl on, is that I was very, very in touch with my intuitive guidance, and which I call my knowingness. And my intuitive guidance most often was contradicted what I was seeing out there. And for whatever smart reason, I thought that this still small voice, this intuitive guidance, was smarter than all the crap, pardon my French, that was happening out there. I'm like, that really doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I remember really early on, like, again, 4 or 5, when I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I would think that. And then I'd go inward and listen to that. So I would suggest that for anyone that they go to their intuitive guidance.
And that's ultimately how you like slayed the dragon, right? Of that desire to have your dad's approval, the very approval that was never given, the devastation of that lack of approval, and the messaging that you got throughout life, where it was just like that voice was so destructive. You unleashing your own knowingness and empowering that voice that lived within you, which it sounds like to me that was really the thread of how, with very little support exterior, you were able to liberate and like ignite the flame or fan the flame that was within you to do all these things, these amazing things you've done, and now to help others. Like, how did you reconcile that with that negative voice? Like, how, once you had the strong inner voice, did you ever come to blows or head to head with?
Oh my goodness, that's such a great question. So you are accurate in that. I feel like that's my intuitive guidance saved my life, literally. So that's what I would say. And once I distinguished and was solid in that the left, especially the critical judgmental voice, was just really a mirror of the patriarchy, I started only listening to my intuitive guidance. So that, that's what I would say. And yes, in terms of coming, what I use, because, that left brain's, monkey mind, critical, judgmental still happens, but, it's completely, well, the bottom line is that my intuitive guidance voice is louder than the judgmental voice now, which is, I'm so grateful for, and it's because I trust it and I listen to it. But when it was not so strong, I would just say, essentially, literally say, thank you for sharing, but I'm listening to this part of me now. And I'd have to say that, many times a day, often, thank you for sharing. I'm listening to this part of me now.
Have you ever read The Untethered Soul?
I have not, although it's been recommended to me over and over again. Yeah, so maybe it's time.
No pressure, but he talks about that, where that voice is like, he calls it the roommate. And he's like, would you want to live with that as a roommate? And when you think about it as something exterior to you, because I always thought, well, if it's in my head, it must be real. And I hear this voice, and it's so funny. We're talking about voices and stuff, but yeah, he talks about it he's like, it's not real, flat out. It's like a roommate. Would you want that roommate around? And then once you do that, similar to what you're saying, right, you can shift it, and then you can have any conversation. So it's funny, a big thing for me my whole life was I always wanted to be a singer. And in my show, I think I've talked about in this show, in my comedy show, I set up the whole premise for my whole act is I would sing for my dad, and he would just destroy it. Like, he'd be like, my dad fully at one point said, I've never heard someone have a worse voice. When he saw a video of me singing at a talent, I emceed an event for agents in LA, like LA, New York agents that came to visit talent in Chicago, and I emceed, and I did an opening song, and he's like, he saw the video, and he's like, I've never heard anyone be a worse singer. And it's just devastating, right? This year, for my birthday, my 40th birthday, it was in March, we went to my sister's house, and I bought a new guitar because I was super excited. I bought this guitar. I've always dreamed of this guitar. I manifested this guitar, and I was like, let me sing. I'm like, all I want for my birthday, 40th birthday, because COVID, it was March 8th. My birthday's March 9th. This was March 8th. We already canceled our trip because of COVID. We saw what's coming. So I was like, all I want for my 40th is to sit with you crazies, you jokers, and I want to sing for you guys. And so I sang for them, and my mom was very complimentary. She's like, oh my God, he's really singing, because I've been practicing. And over the years, they've told me that I have a good voice. They saw me in musicals. They were complimentary. But my dad started yelling. He had to find something. Because in my act, I started singing and then I stop and I do a joke. And so here I sang a little bit and then I'd stop and move on to another song. It was habitual. And he goes, wait, I don't understand. Wait, this is what you do? You sing in your show and then you stop. Sing the full song. And I was like, was he just complimenting me that he wanted the full song? Like, it's hard to hear with the yelling, but in that moment I was like, oh shit, my dad thinks I'm a decent enough singer where he wants to hear me sing. That's never happened in 40 years.
Yeah.
And you know, like with all the voices and all the inner work that I've done on empowering my voice, you know how much that meant to me? You know how much that moved me? Zero.
Yeah.
Didn't move the dial one bit because I was like, I just wanted to sing for these people. I got what I wanted, right? It's nicer than if they walked away for sure, but it's like, it's astounding how we can shift, right? That incredible voice and
Yes.
create a better dialogue within ourselves, right? That's the knowingness.
Yeah. And the other thing that I would say, it's so interesting because friends comment on it all the time and all the time. And that is that I so rely on my intuitive guidance. Like many people say, if they're doing something big or making a decision, then they have to have a poll and they have to ask everybody and the majority wins or whatever. I do none of that because I know what's right for me is what my knowingness is telling me. So very rarely do I ask my friends' opinions about what I should do. They're like, you never ask us, what you should do. I'm like, because you're not the authority on me. I mean, I love you, but you're not the authority on me. I'm the authority on me.
I'm so glad you bring this up. This is it. Like, this is like soup to nuts. I don't know if that's the right term, but this is brass tacks right here. So I'm in the process right now of looking for an apartment. I've been cohabitating. I've been roommating with my co-parent, with my ex-wife, and where we felt like it's like, okay, like respectfully, lovingly, we've reached the end. Let's, I think it's time now for me to move into my own place. And so I'm looking for an apartment within 15 minutes of where my daughter and my ex-wife are gonna live, so I can be here in a flash. And we have a really good setup and everything. So, but like, I want to go back to the apartments that we were in before we moved to this house. We were going to move to separate apartments in that building. But with COVID, we're like, let's just stay together a little bit longer for her sake. And and it's 15 minutes away. But there's another apartment complex like 5 minutes from here, and there's a bunch, and none of them are making me happy. I love the apartments that we lived in before. And I'm like, I have all these voices of people in my head going, well, Ron Joseph, you're afraid of change, like you're afraid of anything that's unfamiliar, and I can chart that back, and I go, well, I should be more adventurous, and maybe I should pay more to live closer and get less space or whatever, but like maybe I should pay more to get less. It's amazing how much I'm playing all these ideas in my head when I know in my gut I just want to go back to the old apartment building.
Yes. So listen to that.
But Deborah, what about all these voices though when they say that I'm afraid of change, and when that's a compelling argument, right? We're supposed to change. We're supposed to challenge ourselves. We're supposed to get outside our comfort zone. I love that saying. Am I not getting outside? Am I shelling? Even though I'm like my life's about to change. I'm 40 years old. I'm going to go have my own apartment, and it's a 1-bedroom. Like, that's it. I want my daughter to be comfortable there. Like, it's a lot going on. Like, if I was 25, it's like not a big deal, right? But like, so should I be more comfortable or less comfortable or in my comfort zone, or how do you trust your knowingness in that?
Oh my goodness. So here's what I would say for myself, because I don't know how it is for you, is that I have built up the trust with my knowingness so strongly that I know that I know. So there's not, even when the voices are going, I still am centered in that, and I know when I know. And I can know in a flash, or it can take me, a day or sleeping on it or checking back in. But I am solid in knowing what I know. And it is, now I've got to say that I've been practicing trusting my knowingness actively for over 40 years. So, it's not overnight. So I can tell just by what you're speaking that it's in there. That the old department is the one. You just haven't, been authoritative enough with the other voices to say, got it. I know you're doing this to protect me or, some other reason, but I am listening to this. So it's literally being authoritative to those other voices, not resistant, because if you're resistant, then what happens is it gets louder. So resistance always produces resistance back and louder voice, which is a real key. So if you're resisting any of it, it'll get louder.
It's like parenting. Like if I'm like resisting her pushback, then, but if I'm authoritative, no, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. We're going to go over here. Right? It's the same thing. So did you acquire or accrue that trust? Did that trust build with the knowingness over years of successes where you're like, man, I should have just trusted my intuition?
Well, yes, and absolutely. So it was built in two ways. One is essentially testing it out and trusting, is this really for my highest good? And 100% of the time it is when I listen. Now, the other way I learned, if you will, is by not listening to what I knew was, the correct guidance that my knowingness was telling me. And every single time I didn't listen to what my intuitive guidance was telling me, I would get, and it built over time, at the beginning, it would be little consequences. And then it would be bigger consequences. And then it would be hellish consequences. And so the last time, literally, I didn't listen to my knowingness was 6 years ago. And the consequences were so severe, money-wise and every other wise, that I vowed to listen.
Debra, power to you. That's amazing. Like every time we talk, I'm just like, you become even more of a superhero. I'm like,
thank you. Oh my goodness, thank you.
For sure, thank you. Like big time. But you just saved Christmas just now. And like, so something that we always talk about, and I think you and I have talked about it. Actually, I think you and I talk about it every time we work together, and you're like, Ron, you're pushing me out of my comfort zone. But you just said it, is that, but what, like as an example, when people are calling me out and saying, oh, well, you're just afraid of change, so you're not going to a new place. Okay, I'm afraid of change. Change, I was moved around the world a lot as a kid. It was very traumatic. It was very frustrating. And it wasn't like a fun, sensitive, kind move. It was with a lot of yelling and screaming and loneliness and all this stuff. So yes, like I'll take 5 minutes of comfort. And I always say with the comfort zone thing, working with all women, I go, when have you ever been comfortable? Like, when has the world ever made you comfortable? So, okay, let's take it with a grain of salt, comfort zone. But the idea is that what I think, if I'm interpreting it correctly, that I love is that you go, the intuition knows how to comfortably take you past the comfort zone, as it were, right? So when we work together and I'm like, Deb, let's try this thing or whatever, and you're like, oh, you're out of my comfort zone, but I'm going to try it. You always do it with a smile. I've had people conversely go, nope, not going to do it. And I go, great. That's a hard no, but that's your intuition putting up boundaries, self-caring, bringing it back, right? Putting the mask on before you help the person next to you. Like just going, no, that's not for me. You know, I'm like, okay, well, it's just an idea. Like we don't have to do it. But the idea is that the intuition knows how to comfortably take you past what is your limit in that moment or how to expand it, right? So for me, I go, I'll go check out this apartment tomorrow. And once I'm there, like a different apartment, I'm going to check out a different apartment. And once I'm there, I'll know 100% if it's a no. But the intuition says, let's try it. You don't have to do it, right? Versus not listening would be like, well, it's 7 minutes closer, so I'm going to take it because I'm going to oppose the idea that I'm going back to what's comfortable, right? I'm going to push that's a patriarchy idea, right? Push yourself, try it, you know, force it into submission. Whereas instead I go middle ground, I go intuition says, let's explore it. Let's be curious.
Exactly. Well, and you brought up one of my other favorite topics, which is curiosity, because curiosity is so useful. It is really, really useful. And I use it for others so that I don't judge others. Like if I'm about to judge others, I say, okay, wait a minute. There's some reason they're thinking or feeling or behaving this way, so I just start asking questions. So that's one about curiosity, and the other is you bring up a great point, which is it's like let's try this on. Let's try this on. And my way of saying let's try this on is to just let you know that I bumped into, when I say, oh my God, this is stretching me past my comfort zone, that's acknowledging left brain has just intervened. And left brain has intervened. It's not in charge, but I'm just acknowledging it. And the second I acknowledge it, it backs off.
It's like giving it a name almost, right? Giving a characteristic. Like, I see you, I acknowledge you, I hear you.
Exactly. So you've been the beneficiary of hearing my left brain say, oh, wait a minute. We're in uncomfortable territory here. But I am, and it's been my whole life. It's also another thing that I use to work to my benefit, is that if it's not, life-threatening, I'll try it. And sometimes even if it is life-threatening, I'll try it. But that's another story. Yeah.
But so here it is. I mean, we've come full circle. Like, this is beautiful, Deborah. Like, so this is how, again, the steps that you've told us about here today, like I'm seeing it now in my head, just with this basic situation. This is not me leaving a $300,000 a year job and, with a lot of responsibility, but like I do connect. I see how to connect the dots of all these pieces: the curiosity, the intuition, the knowingness, the left side and the right side of the brain. All these things impact how we potentially stop ourselves from being healthier and self-caring and or advancing creatively or in our fields or whatever, right? These things stop us from moving forward and being successful. And at the same time, if we're more authoritative about what's inside of us and what really comes out in our true authentic selves, in our knowingness, in our intuition, and in understanding how the left brain tries to thwart the right side, then it's like you can make healthier decisions. So it is possible. And again, it's like I would love for people to connect with you and hear your story in more, we don't have a lot of time for it today, but like, your story is so powerful, and we kind of touched on it very briefly here today. But you are a true survivor and someone who's created an amazing, in my opinion, empire, of success and positivity and ripples of kindness and love amidst not having that, so it's like, I'm just so grateful. You're talking about curiosity instead of judgment. When we, when we work together, when I talk to you, period, like I judge. I'm like, she's so awesome. From now on, I'm going to be more curious and be like, how is she so awesome?
Well, and and I'll tell you, Ron, there are many, 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 many stories you have not heard. So there will always be a response to your curiosity, because, I did, as you alluded to, I did write my memoir that came out in March. But there are literally, once I finished it, there are at least 2 more books that are memoir-ish, because I have so many, and of course I'm going to live for a long time. So there'll be future stories, but there's also past stories that didn't get into the first memoir.
Well, and I'm going to look through my crystal ball and tell you that there is also a one-woman show that I keep, every time we talk, I keep pitching you. But it's okay. No pressure. We'll do the one-woman show later,
Okay. Well, I'm open. I'm curious and open to that. And I've done, as you know, 3 mini one-woman shows on Kauai. So I have a taste for that, and it was really a good taste, I want to say.
And again, your story is so important for especially women to hear. And I love, in the work that you do, how you do work with the patriarchy, like where it's not that you don't vilify, you don't demonize it, but you do call it out clearly. And again, it's not to say that it's all men. It's the energy of trying to suppress and keep us down. So the work you're doing is brilliant. How do people? They should, like, women who are wanting to just live better, more high quality of life, how do they get a hold of you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, would be on my website, and there's a ton of information about who I am and my services. And the URL for that is creativing.info. And let me spell creativing, because it's a combination of creative living. And so it's creativing.info. And then if you're curious about the memoir, there's a separate website, and it's beyondchaosbook.com. So that's beyondchaosbook.com. Either way, you can get a hold of me via the contact page, and I'm really happy to have a conversation, a free conversation, 30 to 45 minutes to anyone that is interested in having a chat.
And I'll put links below for, so that they have it. But yeah, Debra, that was amazing. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you just for being in my life and in everyone's life who you impact, because we do get a lot from you. So you are wonderful. Virtual hug. I adore you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Virtual hug back too.